The Road to Autonomy is presented by the Road to Autonomy Index. The Road to Autonomy Index is a rules-based equity benchmark index that measures the performance of a basket of global companies that are involved in the development and commercialization of autonomy. Institutional investors and fund managers are watching megatrends that are shaping investment opportunities today. These megatrends are creating thematic investment ideas and opportunities for forward-thinking investors. We believe that one of the biggest megatrends today is autonomy. That's why we created the Road to Autonomy Index, the world's first and only pure-play index to track the thematic investment opportunity in autonomy. Follow the Road to Autonomy Index on your favorite finance app by simply typing in the ticker Autonomy. To learn more about the Road to Autonomy Index, visit roadtoautonomy.com/index. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to welcome Paul McGlone, CEO of Seeing Machines. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you here because you're focused with Seeing Machines on the in-cabin monitoring market. Me being a market guy, your market's maturing. In Seeing Machines, Paul, you've been around for 23 years, and now it seems the market's finally catching up to the groundbreaking technology that you've developed for around in-sensing cabin technology. As the market adopts in-sensing cabin technology, how do you see the technology evolving to meet consumer demand?
Well, it's a really interesting question. The primary driver of demand is regulatory. So this started first in Europe with Euro NCAP and the European Commission now pushing through the general safety regulations. And a small fact here is that we were the party instrumental in presenting the initial science to those bodies that has now been incorporated and driving this regulation. Certainly in Europe, it's been adopted in China, and it will harmonise around the world in coming years. But on the consumer point, so it is a safety regulatory push, which is very good for us. But on the consumer point of view, of course, it's very important to develop systems that can deliver safety outcomes with a minimum of annoyance to the consumer. So that's a really important design fundamental that we take very seriously. The whole front end of what we do is based on very deep understanding of human factors design so that we can deliver outcomes that consumers can tolerate and appreciate rather than treat as an annoyance. And once you have that trust and that technical capability, we can overlay, and the OEMs, the car manufacturers can overlay non-safety features or convenience features, comfort features that dramatically improve the consumer's experience in the cabin. And these things are now starting to merge very, very rapidly.
Are the convenience features, is that a key or a pillar of building trust with the consumer? Because when I think about the regulatory demand and the focus there, to me, it screams, hello, distracted driving, we have a problem. Bob or Mary's on the phone not paying attention. But it seems from the convenience feature standpoint, you can kind of build that trust. Is that how you're bridging it from both the regulatory standpoint and the consumer standpoint?
Yeah, and look, I think there's a very important anchor in trust in the core safety feature delivery. For example, if you're a car owner with teenage children that are driving your car, what is one of the most popular and dangerous activities in car drivers, in particular young car drivers today? Texting while driving. So being able to detect a distraction event like that can be fatal really adds a layer of confidence for parents and consumers in vehicles. But I think it is true that overlaying additional features that bring other things to life in the cabin are really, really important.
With texting and driving, let's just say there's a teenage driver behind the wheel. Did mom and dad get a notification that teenage driver did a big no-no? Did they get a notification where they can help correct it or potentially save that life?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So what we do is we provide a set of features inside the vehicle or a set of signals inside the vehicle. The OEM then has really an infinite opportunity to integrate those features into passive and active safety outcomes, depending on how they see their vehicle or their model being positioned in the marketplace. So Today, we don't see OEMs necessarily embracing a kind of external trigger like that, but that's not to say that they couldn't. So, for example, in our aftermarket business, we push fatigue events and distraction events into our 24/7 support center where we observe the actual incident and report back to the fleet manager that there's a problem. So technically, we do this. We only do it today in commercial vehicles because that's where the demand is. But there's no reason why it couldn't be incorporated as cars become universally more connected.
I could see it in the future where one of your OEM customers integrates it into the app, into the car app, and perhaps that parent gets a push notification. Yeah. That's a very simple, easy way to communicate that could potentially save a life or save the way it's all evolving. So walk me through your in-sensing cabin technology. How does it work? What is it sensing? You're looking at eyes, mouths, if you're looking at head turns, what exactly are you sensing?
Good question. So I'll build up the technology first, in a sort of 4-block picture. We start with the human factors design. And we are probably a leader in this element of the system design. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about the system as opposed to the signal or the software. Because we're of the view, and we're a little bit different, that system needs to be considered in its entirety in order to optimize the outcomes that the OEMs are looking for. So we design first with the human in mind and the environment of the cabin in mind. We then develop algorithms that we convert into software. And the way we do that is we take a vast quantum of naturalistic driving data that we have derived from our aftermarket or commercial vehicle business that is really rich in all of the edge cases required to develop high-performing software. So we develop that software. We design an optical path, the camera system, that depending on its location and depending on the OEM's specific performance criteria is optimized. And then we also design or advise on the way that software is processed. Where is it processed? At the edge, in a central compute, somewhere else? We specialize in the acceleration of that software stack to minimize the power consumption because power is at a premium, space is at a premium. So the components are design, software, camera design, and processing on some silicon product somewhere. And we package all that up into a system that is embedded in the vehicle. What we're measuring is essentially the human condition. Now that can include body pose, gestures, head position, eyelid movement, and most importantly, direct gaze, so pupil tracking, extremely accurate pupil tracking. We're also moving into lip movement in order to essentially triangulate between what the system is seeing and gaining some inference potentially of what the driver is saying. And all of this is designed to improve the richness of the features that we can present. So by doing all of that, we can detect fundamentally fatigue and distraction, the onset of fatigue, but also myriad other features like, are you smoking? Are you holding a phone? Are you wearing a seatbelt? Is there someone in the back seat? Is there someone in the passenger seat? And these features are continuing to evolve both in number and in terms of their specific performance very rapidly.
How about sweating profusely? Somebody just cannot stop sweating. Perhaps it's a medical issue or they could be experiencing a potential heart attack. Can your system pick up on that?
That's a great question. Look, that's on our roadmap agenda. We're working on specifically on intoxication, which is a big theme, particularly in the US, that has now been embedded in the infrastructure bill that was pushed through a year or so ago. So that's a very big thing for us, and we're well advanced down that journey. The sudden onset of illness is another area that we're looking at as a real requirement from OEMs. Depending on how the technology evolves and the demand for direction in this health space, you could certainly pick up signals like that. And as we move from a 2D sensing experience to a 3D sensing experience that brings depth to the equation, things like body mass, height, seat position, potentially heartbeat, and all of those things are actually not just theoretical opportunities, but roadmap items.
To me, that seems like what you're creating with those roadmap items, you're laying the foundation for autonomy to put these systems in fully autonomous vehicles. Is that where you're going with this? Because you have to know if somebody's going to get drunk and puke or if they're going to have a heart attack. Eventually, the autonomous vehicle operator or owner is going to have to know that at some point in the future. It seems like your system can detect that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Now, there's a couple of factors in that question, right? Some of the fully autonomous developers are thinking that there will be no observation in the cabin. And their system will be able to handle everything that needs to be handled without observing the passengers. Now, I'm not sure about that, and I'm not sure about the veracity of it, and if it occurs, how long out that is going to be. But importantly, levels 2 through 4 semi-autonomous features are going to be around for a very, very, very long time. And whether a car is fully autonomous or not, if it has a steering wheel and therefore is giving the owner the option to drive, there will be a requirement for a driver monitoring system and an occupant monitoring system because it's mandated, and it'll be mandated worldwide. So I think the big question is, how many years is it going to take for full autonomous vehicles without a steering wheel to be the lion's share of motor vehicle production? Very long time. So the core target market for our technology is levels 2 through 4. But certainly, as the companies that are managing fully autonomous, say, third-party vehicle fleets, will need some way to detect the well-being of the occupants, particularly if they're paying for the service.
I'll get into economics with you here. You can look at it where it could potentially lower the insurance rate because you know what the occupant's doing in there. Another growth market I see for you is the rise of personally owned autonomous vehicles. There's a large movement. Ghost Autonomy is doing it. GM has talked about it, potentially a personally owned autonomous vehicle where from your home to the motorway, it'll drive you autonomously. But when you get to the urban environment, you have to take over. And you and I both know fatigue sets in, human factors set in. Is that where a solution where your driver monitoring system could come into play and say, okay, buddy, you got to wake up. We're going into urban environment now. Got to pay attention.
That is exactly the problem being solved here, whether it be in level 2 or level 5. If there's a handover required because a risk has been identified, either externally or internally or both, there is a requirement to bring that driver back to the job of driving, back to being attentive. I mean, that is the main game.
One could even make the argument that your system will allow level 3 to scale. I mean, it's point blank because you're going to have that. You said there will be a regulatory environment globally. Yes, at some point. I don't know when, but it's going to come. So you have a market. Your market's growing. In fiscal year 2023, Seeing Machines generated $13.6 million US in annual recurring revenue, up 27% over fiscal year 2022. What led to this increase in annual recurring revenue? Was it the market is starting to mature and grow, or what led to it?
So there's two parts to the business, three essentially, but the two main parts that generate revenue. The part that you're talking about now, that's our aftermarket or commercial fleet business, where we install a device into a truck, connect them to a monitoring service, and that monitoring service is what derives that annual recurring revenue. And that's growing as a consequence of sophisticated truck operators around the world looking for ways to reduce fatigue and distraction risk. Now, why is that so important? Well, fatigue and distraction are the two primary drivers of insurance claims costs in commercial vehicle fleets worldwide. It's a worldwide issue. So you have another issue, and that is in most countries, particularly countries in the modern economies, insurers are ever increasing age limits on drivers. So you have an aging driver population and a higher and higher bar on when new drivers can enter the business because they're being blocked out by insurers. So many insurance companies these days, certainly in the markets where we operate, are doing things like, if you deploy technology that can mitigate this significant risk, we will allow you to employ drivers, let's say, under the age of 25. So all of these things are starting to happen, and they kind of build on themselves, and And these are the things that are, apart from the core risk that's being mitigated, these are the external things that are also supporting the take-up rate, which leads to that annual recurring revenue. And we expect that to continue to grow at 30 to 40% per annum for compound for, a number of years. The market is highly underpenetrated.
What's on the other side of the business? Is that your royalty business?
Yeah, so in the automotive business, where we put our technology into new vehicles, so we have 15 programs with 10 OEMs. We have our technology in around about 1 million cars. And the way that business model works is we win business on a tender, or what we call an RFQ, request for quote, via a tier one. So the OEM gives the RFQ to the tier one. It comes to us. We respond technically and commercially through the tier one. Once that business is awarded, we have about a 2 to 3 year engineering development effort. And once that effort is concluded, cars go into production, and we receive a one-off royalty for every car that is manufactured in that model for the life of model, which is typically 6 or 7 years. So in those royalties, so the main game really is getting cars to production so that we can get the software royalty. The engineering services is necessary, but not as commercially attractive. But once we're into royalties, that number just keeps growing and growing and growing. So today we've won about $320 million US of royalty business. We're only at the beginning of that cycle, so it will run out. And those royalties will increase by roughly 20% per quarter compound between here and the end of financial year FY27. So we have a very strong locked-in revenue stream with high visibility. Royalties are very, very high margin. So as we consider our business going forward, we're not only going to see significant growth rates, but we're going to see a mix change in revenue from sort of engineering services, low margin, to primarily royalties, which are very, very high margin. This is what I'm calling the inflection point. It's happening now. Of the 15 programs that we've won, production's really only started in the last year, and it will continue to increase out to FY27. Now, that doesn't include any of the business that we expect to win, driven by Euro NCAP and other factors. So we're really at an inflection point, I think, that is quite unique.
For the royalty business, are you basing it off of an ARM model? It seems that you're very similar to ARM, where you're going to grow very profitable royalties over the course of the lifetime of a vehicle.
We elected to leverage our intellectual property a little more aggressively a few years ago, and we've really experimented with that, to be frank. Now, we have sold what we call our ocular intellectual property, which is essentially our driver monitoring system accelerated IP, into a couple of silicon businesses, and really that was testing the water. The primary areas where we've developed royalties are getting our technology into new passenger vehicles via the tier ones. Now, that is not like an ARM model because we're selling a software royalty per vehicle, but we're exploring as many opportunities as we can to leverage our IP. We've done some one-off licensing deals, which have been really interesting. In the very early days, we sold the rights to our aftermarket business in mining to Caterpillar. We still enjoy a fascinating and productive relationship with Caterpillar, where they sell our product into mining worldwide. We've done similar with Magna, where we've sold them the rights to use our technology exclusively inside the rearview mirror, and that's a really unique partnership. And then, of course, we get royalties per vehicle, and then where we can, where it makes sense, trying to sell our tracking IP to silicon parties that are interested in doing that.
Magna Partnership's interesting. Your technology goes in the rear view mirror. Is it beautifully clean, flush, as if you were to buy any old car? Would a passenger or a driver even know that your system's in there?
No.
Wow.
You can't see it. It's behind the mirror. Yeah. It's a fascinating development. And as I said, as I've said in a few other places, I mean, what's unique about this is if you consider the mirror, it's an obvious location because you don't have to re-engineer the dashboard of every model, right? So engineering-wise, it's a lot cleaner, simpler. The marketing guys in car companies don't freak out that you've got a lump on the dashboard, which is a camera. But of course, there are all kinds of issues with it, and that is people of different heights. So the physics of the camera location is interesting. It gets very hot. It vibrates. You move it. So how can we set up the technology in the camera and the performance of the software to continue to detect you as the driver and deliver up those signals that are required under Euro NCAP or required more broadly, and at the same time do that in a location that has the potential to continuously move and also detect what's going on with the occupant through a single camera. So that's the I guess the unique piece of the equation that we've brought to the table, and probably the primary reason why Magna was interested in the relationship with us.
I'm going to ask you the simple question. How? How is this possible?
A technical solution, obviously, but in very simple terms, normally you'd have a fixed camera and we'd be observing you, your head position, eyelid movement, pupil. And in this case, because that camera has the potential to move, we develop the capability to anchor that vision direction to other parts of the cabin. And by doing so, we can accommodate a whole range of different positions and still detect or still present the features that we need to. So it's just taking a different approach to attack the problem.
It's really smart. I have a vehicle that has a driver monitoring system, and I'll leave the OEM out of this. And lo and behold, they should have called you, Paul, because where they put the DMS, they put it right where the screen is that shows my speed, and the way that I put my steering wheel, it says driver monitoring unable to activate, steering wheel's blocking. Well, I like my steering wheel there. Your system fixes that problem. When the Seeing Machines was developing this technology over the last 23 years, did you run all those different scenarios of, well, if the consumer put their wheel here, it would block it. We're better off putting it here because the designers say we can't put it on top. Is that one of the main reasons why you went there?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is performance is one reason, yes, to answer your question. Cost is another. So if you don't have to re-engineer the whole dashboard, for example, obviously placing a system in the mirror is cheaper, materially cheaper, by the way. And the other is speed of implementation. And given that Euro NCAP has a drop-dead date attached to it, this presents an opportunity for OEMs to more rapidly get to the answer without having this gigantic re-engineering task on all models, essentially placing cameras in the dash or center stack or a pillar. Now, this issue about occlusion of the camera is a really important issue. This is where the human factors design principle comes in from the get-go. So we would advise OEMs have a few choices on where to put the camera. On the A pillar, as you would drive on the left-hand side, connecting the roof of the vehicle to the dashboard, directly in front on the dashboard, or in the center stack or infotainment system, or the rearview mirror. So all those options exist. They all have price-performance trade-offs. And when we talk about our systems approach to the problem, we present those options to the Tier 1 and the OEM, and we are able to show the price-performance differences in each of those. Now, look, there are some vehicles, just because of the cabin dimensions, where the mirror is less attractive from a performance point of view. It's probably always more attractive from a price point of view, but at the outer edge, less attractive. But we think 70% of vehicles would benefit by having their driver and occupant monitoring systems embedded in the mirror or on the mirror or in the mirror location. But certainly if you can put it all behind the glass, that's a really neat and elegant way to do it. Keeps everybody happy.
It's neat, it's elegant, and then as we go to full autonomy with no pedals and no Steering wheel, you open up the opportunity to build things on top of your system as we go into augmented reality, and that gets really fun. How do you price this? Because to me, the growth is there, the opportunity is there. You're working with tier ones. Tier ones are stingy. So how do you price this?
Yeah. Well, the tier ones are stingy because the OEMs are stingier. That's the way it goes. But what is important, we essentially have a menu of features, okay? And let's say there are 50 features on the menu, and an OEM might say to us in the first conversation, we want 50 features to operate at 100% performance. And we say, all right, well, that's $30 per vehicle. And then they'll say, of course, oh, well, let's have 40 at 90%. What's that going to cost? So we go through this, and I'm grossly oversimplifying it, but we go through this iteration where we land on a price performance feature menu. And it really depends on how many features they want as to what the unit price is. Then what happens is the OEM will offer us over the length of the agreement or the model different volume breaks. And so we will price our bundle of features at different levels depending on the committed minimum volumes. The beauty of that model is that, and we know the more volume we do, the lower the ASP. That's normal, but it works for us. But they have an insatiable appetite for more features. The regulators are also demanding that the systems that are in place continue to evolve with higher performance. So there is a very long-term driver of, let's say, features. We often refer to this as the feature wars inside our business, where there seems to be this crazy demand for features, some of which are safety, some of which are comfort and convenience, some of which are silly. But nonetheless, this is good for us. So the more that people can invent or imagine, whether that be us or the OEM, the greater our potential to extract value.
And it's greater for your royalty business. Stay on the royalty business. Is your system software upgradable? Over time, can you unlock features through software upgrades?
Yeah, and we can update. Yeah, we can update over the year, and we have programs running implementing that capability right now.
Your automotive business is growing. Autonomy is going to be great for your business, but outside of automotive, you've expanded into aerospace to a partnership with Collins Aerospace, which is a Raytheon corporation. Why aerospace? Why now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Why now is the interesting bit. I mean, we've been working in that space for actually 5+ years, and we were really successful in getting interest from carriers, both commercial and military, where we got our technology into pilot training simulators, air traffic control environments, and also we've sold the only program into an aircraft, which is for the Victorian in Australia, the Victorian Air Ambulance, which is a single pilot aircraft. Now, what we deduced, probably a little slowly, was that to be effective in the long term in aviation would require a significant build-up of capability to manage the regulatory issues, the compliance issues, and so on and so on and so forth. So we took a decision 2 years ago to say, look, we've got great traction. We actually have unbelievable customers, but we need a partner to go to market with. And for us to do this alone isn't really viable. And it's not viable for two reasons. The overhead that I've just described, which we could do, but it's not impossible, but it costs money, and we were looking to reduce our spend, not increase it. But the other thing is, things in aviation take a long time. And that's the bad news. The good news is things in aviation take a long time. So once you're in it, unlike an automotive vehicle model run of 6 years, in aviation, you're talking 20, 30 years. And so it's the same technology with some variation around features. We're looking at 3 discrete markets within aviation: pilot training simulators, aircraft, and air traffic control. And we're looking at commercial and military, and we have a toe in the water in all of those. So Collins was the perfect partner. They're the world's largest avionics provider, owned by Raytheon. We've been working with them along this journey for years. And finally, we've locked in this long-term partnership. They will be the go-to-market. They will manage the regulatory technical issues. They will manage the certification. They have the capability to mass produce all of the things that would simply be a problem for us. They are world-leading experts in. And we just need to focus with them on product design, software development, and delivery, and they take care of the rest. The other part of the why is pilot fatigue is endemic. It's in a post-COVID world where aircraft were taken out of the market, lots of pilots were retired, demand's coming back stronger than ever. It's one of the major concerns in the aviation industry worldwide. So this is absolutely the right time for this kind of technology in aviation.
It's going to increase safety. I'm really curious, will you jointly develop new products or services with Collins since you understand monitoring systems and Collins understands aerospace probably better than most, if not everybody?
We will. That's the intention. And with the first cab off the rank, so to speak, is that we're working on a first generation proof of concept system. And that's the system that, Collins will then be able to demonstrate to their very, very broad customer base. We get involved in a lot of these conversations directly. In fact, most, if not all, of the current opportunities that we're working on together are a result of our 5 or 6 years of effort in this space. So there's a very warm pipeline of carriers and frankly OEMs that are well experienced with our technology. So, yeah.
You mentioned air traffic control. How is the system going to be used in air traffic control?
Well, it's very similar to pilot training simulators. So it may be about fatigue, distraction, cognitive load, but it is also about accurately tracking the eyes. What is the operator looking at? And are they looking at the right thing? So if you're training a pilot and you're asking the pilot to execute a certain routine inside the training simulator, which is an exact copy of the cockpit of the aircraft they'd be flying, it's really important to know what that training pilot is looking at. I mean, are they looking in the area that they ought to be when they're exercising a given routine? In the past, that was a qualitative assessment by a third party standing behind them with a clipboard. Now it's a scientific outcome based on a very, very accurate measure of pupil direction. Same goes for air traffic control.
If I'm in the risk management department, I'm knocking down your door and banging it and saying, Paul, please deploy these systems because you're going to lower the risk of my operation.
This is the point. It is getting red hot in that space. Now, look, things move. When I say red hot, it's like one of these things that is red hot. There is a lot of demand. There is increasing risk in the space. Those risks are converting into real issues as opposed to theoretical risks. And there is a process to go through in the aviation sector around certification of the technology for safe use in an aircraft and so on and so on and so forth that is absolutely underway. So it looks like it's moving really slowly, but in fact, all of the right things are being done so that there is a very real opportunity to develop this tech in the aviation mass market. And that's the power of partnering with the likes of a Collins. All that is taken care of.
It's very, very powerful. As you expand into aerospace with Collins, what are your thoughts on the eVTOL market? Will you look for opportunities there since that market is getting close to FAA certification? I'm not going to give a timeline on the commercial rollout because I don't buy any of the timelines out there, but we're getting very close to EU certification. We're getting close to FAA certification. Do you view that as a potential growth market for you in aerospace?
We do in time, for the same reason that you're a bit skeptical on timelines, so are we. But we already have interest from that space. And we have an active program running here in Australia in that space as well. So it's really fascinating to me that that's an area that's picking up pace. Certainly, they will have all of the same. Well, they'll have the combined risks of a passenger vehicle and an aircraft. Now, in an aircraft, of course, unlike driving a car, you're not sort of looking to the left and looking to the right and looking straight. You're not constantly assessing for immediate risk, right? It's a different set of scenarios that you're engaged with. But I can imagine if you're, going up and going down and moving into areas that are, more crowded, so to speak, in terms of the risk potential, that the requirement for this kind of technology increases rather than decreases. So we think that almost every industrial opportunity that has a human-machine interface is an opportunity for accurate eye tracking to improve either a safety or a performance outcome.
That just goes into what you're trying to do with growing your royalty revenue. The way the agreement's structured with Collins Aerospace, there's a large focus on long-term royalty revenue. As CEO, is one of your goals to grow the royalty revenue over the long term?
Yeah, there is a temptation as a smaller company to try and maximize what you can up front and kind of give away the back end. But after we have done a couple of these license deals, we've done one with Caterpillar, one with Magna, so this is the third. We knew that we could afford to take a longer term view, and we're very much of the mind that the value of this particular vertical will increase, if not a little more slowly than automotive. It will increase in its margin contribution very significantly over time. And that was the objective, to create some optionality with really high margin contribution in return for the R&D effort that we put in over the last 20 years. So that was the objective.
Plain and simple, investors like royalty revenue. You're in the automotive sector, you're in the aerospace sector, and I have this whole philosophy that both industries learn from each other. Ground learns from air, air learns from ground. As a tier 2 supplier to both industries, what are you hoping to learn? So you're seeing this really unique nexus of both emerging industries.
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. And it's, we started in the aftermarket business, putting tech into mining vehicles. That deal with Caterpillar enabled us to get into automotive and ultimately aviation. So aviation is the environment that is really at the pinnacle for safety and certification and repeatability. Automotive is really the space where certainly there are very, very high performance criteria, but very, very solid cost pressures. And because it's a consumer market, it's a much more rapid development space. So we take those characteristics of high performance, low cost, rapid development, and we convert them into a market that takes a much different view of timeline, but a really important position in terms of the pinnacle of safety, and vice versa. So it is symbiotic.
Safety is the glue that holds it all together, because safety builds trust. And without trust, you're not going to get an automobile. Without trust, you're not going to get on a plane. Which raises this question, Paul: what is the future, in your opinion, of in-cabin monitoring?
Well, look, our purpose is to get everyone home safely, and we believe that to our core, and it is what makes us different and what enables us to get out of bed in the morning. When we consider the cabin and the rapid evolution of the in-cabin technologies, there are a couple of fascinating things that are occurring here. Yes, technologies are developing very rapidly, whether they be voice or vision or other technologies. But also, vehicles are becoming more distracting in of themselves. You have larger screens with all these things going on. And then we have these environments where the vehicle is sensing externally, now sensing internally. What are the opportunities to integrate the external and internal sensing? What are the opportunities to integrate, let's say, the voice capability with the vision capability to get a much richer outcome? If you talk about well-being, health, sudden onset of illness, heart attack, for example, and then you talk potentially about responses and the like, if you're able to fuse a range of sensing capabilities, say voice, vision, and who knows what else, and potentially in 3D, you create not only an ability for the driver or the consumer to really integrate into the vehicle, but you've got this opportunity to develop deeper, more active safety features that can essentially potentially preempt risk and change the functionality and perhaps the trajectory of what's going on inside and outside the vehicle to avoid risk. Now, that's a bit out there, right? But if all of these sensing capabilities are integrated and becoming more and more integrated and are then connected to not just passive but active safety features, I mean, there's an unlimited potential for what can happen.
There's an unlimited potential for what can happen, but you said this, everyone will get home safely. Everyone will get home safely. And that's what your technology is enabling, especially as it becomes more distracted. Hyperscreens, this voice assistant, that voice assistant, this knob, that knob. No, it's a screen, it's a button, the menu doesn't work. Well, your system ensures that everyone can get home safely, and that's something that you should be extremely proud of, Paul. As we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
Well, there's often a fear that people are being watched. That is absolutely not what this is about. We're not the technology that gets deployed here is not watching anyone. It's identifying risk, and it's enabling a far safer world by mitigating those risks. And as a consequence of that, our business growth is driven by a set of regulations that are harmonizing worldwide, and we are now at this inflection point where our technology is being taken up at a rapid rate worldwide. And that's the point. After 2 decades of endeavor, we're finally at this point where we're looking forward to a business that will grow very significantly year on year from here on.
You're identifying risk, you're increasing safety today. In the future, you're going to enable in-vehicle interactive experiences, and that's going to be fun. We'll have you back on when that technology matures and that happens and becomes public. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is seeing machines. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
If you've enjoyed listening, please kindly rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Road to Autonomy, or email podcast@roadtoautonomy.com. The Road to Autonomy podcast is produced by the Road to Autonomy LLC. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect those views of the Road to Autonomy, its subsidiaries, its shareholders, directors, investors, or partners. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be taken as legal, investment, tax, or business advice. Nothing is a recommendation that you purchase, sell, or hold any security or other investment, or that you pursue any investment style or strategy. The content of this podcast is presented on an as-is basis with no warranties, express or implied, of any kind. Financial mentions about companies in the Road to Autonomy Index and discussions about the Road to Autonomy Indexes are for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon when making any investment decision. Furthermore, an inclusion of security within the Road to Autonomy Index is not a recommendation by the Road to Autonomy Indices, LLC, to buy, sell, or hold that such security, nor is it considered to be investment advice.